I'm recording. So if you don't want to be recorded, don't say anything. Okay, back to where we were. So some best practices to prevent academic dishonesty, starting with assignments. Okay, a couple things to think about. When you give students assignments and you put them out there, you want to always make sure you're reminding them of that we have an academic integrity policy. Okay, this is good practice live or online. But just to put in your instructions somewhere that the academic integrity policies are still in effect. And this is what they look like for this particular assignment. Okay, that's a really important part of it. Hold on, I have to admit someone. You also want to explicitly spell out boundaries of collaboration on assignments. I mean, every assignment is different. Some assignments, of course, will be totally work by yourself. Some assignments you might allow collaboration or discussion up into the point of creation. Whatever those boundaries are, you just want to make sure you really are explicit about spelling them out for your students. Then you want to make sure you're using what UB has to offer. So we have a tool in UB Learns called Safe Assign, and we'll talk about the tools much more specifically at the end. But Safe Assign will scan to see if what's been submitted is very similar to something else that's been submitted or something that already exists in the Safe Assign sort of repository of things that we've collected over the years. So just make sure you use those tools. Make sure students know you're using those tools so that if they're thinking about turning in something that's not authentically their own, you'll prevent them from doing it in the first place. Prevention is truly half the battle. If students think they could get away with something, they're much more likely to try it than if they think they won't. And then whenever possible, if you can offer options for assignments so that you're not collecting, 60 papers of the same, 5 to 7 pages on the same topic. If you can give students options for either what they could write about, or how they can do an assignment, they can, make a podcast for you instead of writing a paper. If you give them that kind of choice, first of all, they're much more likely to have investment in what their choice is. And then you're not going to have to score 60 of the same things, and you're less likely to find academic dishonesty. So those are some general comments about assignments. Move to online exams here. Okay, when you design an online exam, one of the things you want to do right up front with the exam is clarify whatever rules you have for the test. So either letting students know you cannot use any additional information while you're taking this test, or this is open book, or this is some version in between those two things. Let them know what your rules are, and let them know what the consequences of violating those rules will be. Right, so any academic dishonesty will result in failure on this test. Whatever your personal feeling is about it, put it right up front for students to see. So we know there's some good data that if you ask students to begin an exam by attesting to an academic integrity statement, they're much less likely to cheat. So just that prompt, that reminder at the beginning that they're going to do something honestly, when they get to question number 6, if they're tempted to cheat, they're less likely to do it. We have some sample statements that you're welcome to take and adapt on our academic integrity website at UB that you can look at. But again, that's always a good practice because there is some data behind that. Again, we'll talk about tools at the end of the workshop, but we do have something called Lockdown Browser that freezes computers and lets students only do the exam. And we do have something called Respondus Monitor, which is an artificial intelligence sort of videotaping of the student while they take the exam that flags suspicious behaviors. So if you're building your exam in UB Learns, which I hope you are because there are a lot of benefits to that, those are really good tools to use. Then you also can make sure that no 2 exams are alike. If you use multiple versions of exams in hard copy, this is sort of the same thing in an online test. You can develop pools of questions. So basically, you have more questions than any one student would answer. And you could have the test pool and pull from those pools of questions. Say you have questions on photosynthesis and you have 8 questions, you want students to answer 4. So it pulls 4 questions from that pool on photosynthesis. You can group them by level of difficulty, by kind of question, multiple choice versus true false, so that every student is really, in essence, taking a very different test. And you could, like I said, you could set it so that it randomly pulls from them so that no two tests are alike. And along with randomizing, you want to make sure that even if you have only 100 questions and everybody's answering the same 100 questions, they come out in a different order. That's easy to do in the UB Learn settings. We'll talk about that at the end. And that you randomize the answers. Because if students are talking to each other and they say, I don't know the answer to the photosynthesis question, and their friend says, it's C. Well, C is not going to be the same answer for each student if you've randomized them. So you want to make sure you just take advantage of all those tools that we can. Also, it's a good practice to show one question at a time and to set a time limit on the question. If you're concerned that students are going to be looking up answers and the question only gives them 30 seconds, they're not going to have time to look up the answer. So you can also set a time limit on the overall exam if that's your preference. You can also mix up objective and subjective questions. I know a lot of people think they can only build objective questions into UB Learns, and that's not true. We can talk about that also at the end. And then when you set the test, you could customize when you want them to get feedback and how you want them to get feedback. So you can just go ahead and say, not till everyone's completed the test or as soon as they take the test. And you can say if you want them just to see their score or if you want them to see what the correct answers are. So there's actually a lot of good practice built in to the UB Learn system for online exams. It's just that if you've never done it before, you might not know what those practices are or how to use them. Okay, so that's just a couple of things about how to protect for academic integrity in assignments and exams. Now Loretta's going to talk to you about designing for integrity.
Hi everyone, I'm Loretta Frankovich. I'm the Assistant Director from the Office of Academic Integrity. I work closely with Kelly. And the things that I'm going to talk about in terms of designing will not only deter cheating, but they're also best practices in terms of pedagogy. And they're pretty simple. So the first one is don't give a single assessment. Okay, a single performance. So when there's a single test or a single assessment, students will do whatever it takes to succeed. Pressure produces cheating. So you want to make sure that you offer multiple opportunities for learning, give several assessments, quizzes, tests, projects, papers, whatever, just the more the better. And I know that's hard. We've only got a month or so left, but it's better to give more opportunities for learning than less. The second one is follows very closely, they're tied together, is high stakes. So if you only have one more test for the semester and it's worth 50% of your grade, again, that's going to kind of stress students out to the point that they'll want to cheat because they've got so much riding on one single test. So again, offer frequent lower stakes assessments, quizzes, short answer, and stress the retrieval and rehearsal of knowledge so that gives students a chance to practice. The third one is extrinsic versus intrinsic motivation. So obviously we're aiming for intrinsic motivation. The extrinsic motivation is where the student is aiming for the grade, and therefore they're not enjoying the task itself or its utility. So you want to make sure that with intrinsic motivation, you're encouraging students to develop their own questions about big problems and challenges. You're asking students to approach things from different perspectives. So you let the students kind of drive the discussion and the exploration rather than focusing a narrative for them. Let them think more creatively. How do these large questions that you're asking, your learning outcomes, how do they connect to the student lives? How can they affect the student future? So you're not only, again, following best practices here, but you're reducing the incidence of cheating because they're questioning things that are relevant to them and they're thinking about them personally. The fourth thing is low expectations. So sometimes when students have very low confidence and they feel underprepared, they are stressed and they cheat. So the solution to that would be to, again, use these formative assessments, practicing the smaller activities that build their confidence in themselves and build their confidence in their skills. incrementally over time, so that you give them a little bit of feedback here and there, and then it builds their confidence in the material. The next one is cheating culture. So this is peer approval or disapproval of cheating, and it can have a huge impact on learning outcomes. So we don't want to create that culture of cheating or let it become normative. And I know when we're actually physically in a classroom, if I think that my fellow students or my peers are cheating, I'm more likely to cheat. There are many studies about that. So in the online environment, it's the same. We want to make sure that students are aware that this is not acceptable. This is not something that they should be doing in an online environment, in any environment. So you have to use statements like Kelly suggested before you give the tests, before you give an assessment, that says that this is expected of you. Honesty is expected of you, and you need to talk about it very openly so that there's a clear expectation. And then lastly, we want to kind of avoid testing for content knowledge only. And that's where you get just the basic multiple choice sort of questioning. You really want to use things in an online environment that instead kind of question application, how we can use this, how we can analyze something, how we can synthesize information. It follows along with Bloom's taxonomy, which I'm sure you're familiar with, but it's good practices, and it also deters cheating. So the next slide it has some very practical applications. I've mentioned, you can read them yourself, but portfolios, a way to present things in a different way than normally, presentations, real world problem solving. How does COVID-19 figure into what they're doing in your class? How does it matter? The relationships between people and groups. Using their own personal background is important as a basis of an answer, because then they can't cheat. They have to give you some personal thing. They're invested in it then. And selection of a means of a communication. So allow them some creative way to express their knowledge of the content. And there's obviously examples there, but there are many, many more case studies, storytelling, blogs, whatever you can do. And they're confined, so trust me, they're looking for something creative to do, and this will give them a very good opportunity.
So I just want to interject here, this is Kelly Ahuna again, a minute about protecting your own course materials. So as you put your slides, your course videos, your tests, whatever you're designing out there into the students' now remote online environment, it's important that anything you don't want shared with the public, you just protect as much as you can. So you can do that through a fairly straightforward process of copyrighting your material. The United States has pretty good intellectual property laws for faculty, and all you pretty much need to do is put a C with a circle around it, your name and the year at the bottom of your materials, and you're copyrighted. There's information about this on the Academic Integrity website, and there's also information about this that comes out pretty regularly from UUP. So it's just a matter of, in case students didn't know that this was your intellectual property, that copyright symbol with your name and date shows them that in fact there's ownership to what this is. Then it's always a good idea to have copyright language on your syllabus so that students know that you expect that your materials are designed only for use in this course and are not to be shared with any third party. Okay, and that's the language that you can take right off our website to use on your syllabus. So you just want to make sure that you expressly prohibit sharing. This, for a lot of our students, they have grown up in a generation where sharing is the norm, and they don't understand why they can't put anything out there. So you just want to really make sure that you're very clear, if you want to hold your materials tightly, that you're very clear about that. Okay, just a word for protecting yourself. Now we'll talk about some specific tech things.
Hi, this is Maggie from CEI. So UB Learns partners or has Respondus. There are two features to it. There's a lockdown browser and a lockdown monitor. So the lockdown browser is a custom browser that locks down your UB Learns test. So you have to have a test created in UB Learns, and it works with that test. You turn it on, you have the two kind of talk to each other. It allows it allows for the students to not be able to print, copy, go to other websites. It literally locks down their testing site. So that could be an option for you. Along with that, Kelly mentioned earlier that there is Respondus Monitor. That is an AI, it deters cheating. And what that does is it works with the test, but it works with the student's webcam, and it allows them to be recorded as they're taking the test. So it works in collaboration with the lockdown browser, and then it sends, it uses video analytics in the student's webcam, like I just mentioned, but then it'll send any, it'll flag anything that looks inappropriate, it'll flag it and send a report to the professor. And then it'll give you a little report telling you exactly what happened, and then you can address it with the student. So a couple of things that if you're thinking about using Respondus, ask yourself first, what are you using Respondus for? Do you need it to, and we kind of put a little chart together for you, because most people just say, I want to prevent cheating, which is good. Of course, that's what we want to do. But if you look at the first column, the lockdown browser will not help keep students from collaborating with one another. So even though that the screen is locked down, they can still communicate with one another with a separate device. They can use their class resources, so meaning they can have a different device and they can be looking up something there. So it's not a complete safe fail. It definitely has some pros and cons to it. They can use additional outside resources, meaning on a separate device. I mean, many of us have two devices that, we have our phone right in front of us as well as a laptop. Instead of using lockdown browser, maybe consider, like Kelly mentioned, having the academic integrity statement, kind of revisit that in your class, randomize the test questions, create and administer different assessments. So a couple of different options there. Use forced completion, time functioning, and with your UB Learns core test, and then force everyone to begin the assessment at the same time. That may help with preventing them cheating. And then in the right-hand column, the Respondus Monitor. Why would you use that? Well, that's going to help the students from collaborating. So it's watching the student taking the test. They can't be looking anywhere else. They have to finish the test and only work in their environment that they've loaded the test in. It keeps the students from using their class resources because it won't let them switch to another device or another device. It watches as they're taking the test, and using additional outside resources. So it will keep the students from doing all of those three things. If you're thinking about, instead of using Respondus Monitor, if you think that you need to have that watch the student take the test, to try something like incorporating different formative and summative assessments like discussion boards, essays, group projects, things like that into your course. So kind of thinking a little bit outside of the box, if you will. Do you want me to pick that one up, or you want to go with that? Ms. Kelly, back to you, or do you want me to take that?
I thought that was your slide, Maggie.
Okay, that's fine. For the UB Learns assessment tool, so right built into UB Learns, you may or may not know, there are a whole bunch of features that are kind of, they're interesting. You should take a look at them. So you can create assessments, assignments. You can use the e-portfolio system, the Digication is what the name of that is. The students can create blogs. Discussion boards are pretty popular in an online setting. There's interactive rubrics that you guys can build. Journals, that's another way for the student to kind of document exactly what they're working on. Safe Assign is, Kelly already mentioned, so that's a plagiarism tool. So when they upload anything into UB Learns, it would run, you could program it so it runs through Safe Assign and it will check for plagiarism. Another popular component is self and peer assessment. That's pretty popular in an online environment. There's surveys that you can build and test. And then there's wikis so that they can kind of build off of a project and then can kind of work collaboratively on a topic, for example. So lots of things in UB Learns that give it a try, see what's out there.
Yeah, so this slide has some more resources of places to direct you. I mean, UB, I feel fortunate that we have a standalone Office of Academic Integrity. So we have dedicated people and resources to help support faculty and students as we make this change to remote learning. The website is there. There's lots of information on the website. It's sort of grouped together by information for students versus information for instructors. Then there are special COVID links to take you to things that are particularly relevant to now. But you can also always email or call us. Loretta and I spend a lot of time talking to instructors about particular things they're seeing, giving advice about how they can best handle those things, and so on. CEI, Center for Educational Innovation, has lots of stuff on their website to help instructors as they make this move. And then UBIT also has good resources about our Respondus products, Safe Assign, those kinds of things. And Maggie, I don't know if you want to talk about the assessment resources. You're muted, Maggie.
It just gave me a flag saying, hey, you're muted, by the way. Sorry about that. So UB Learns and the UB website itself has a whole bunch, like what Kelly was just mentioning. These are literally links right from all of our websites that give you ideas and suggestions of things that you may want to incorporate into your classes. There's different types of assessment, the formative, the summative, different examples that maybe you haven't thought of. Talks to you a little bit about Blackboard Learns and all of the features that are available through Blackboard itself or UB Learns itself. So give it when Kelly sent, I'm assuming that they're going to get the links to all of these, and then you guys can just click on those, follow right through. It walks you through exactly how to build those. And if you have any questions, CEI, we're here to help you with anything that we've talked about. So
yeah, that's great. And one of the resources I didn't have on my slide that I should have is the link to the Office of Educational Effectiveness site, because they also have a lot of really helpful things. So I'll add that to the slide before they get sent. Okay, that brings us to our references. So I'll stop the share so we can see each other. And that really brings us to questions, thoughts, comments, struggles, anything you want to talk about.
I have in the chat, Judy's asked, she has many students that do not have a webcam. So does that mean that they can't use Respondus? And that's exactly what that means. So they will need a webcam in order to use Respondus Monitor, I should say, just the monitor piece. The Respondus itself, the lockdown browser, yes, they can use that without a webcam.
Okay, thanks for responding. This morning I gave a quiz and there was an error in one of my questions, which I didn't realize because I had scrambled the answers, which then made, the question not make sense. And so I discovered, well, what I already knew, basically. I had students emailing me that, there was a problem with the question, but they were sending me pictures of the question, which means they are taking pictures the whole time, they're taking the test. So I am really struggling with how I can, fairly assess them and whether my grades are going to mean anything. I'm sure not everyone is cheating, but I know a large percentage probably are, and which is not fair to those that aren't. So I know there's probably no good solution, but any advice?
Did you put time limits on the questions for how long they would have to take?
Not per question, I didn't. So I put time limits on the whole quiz itself, but not per question. But they could still, quickly click with their personal cameras right on their phones, for example,
Right.
and still keep taking, the pictures. And I guess what I'm worried about not is what's happening now, but that's going to get all shared down the road, that everything I have is out there forever, which is really sad.
It is. I wish I had a good answer for you for that. We're facing this even with smartwatches and live classes now. Students are taking pictures of questions on their smartwatches and then sharing them out into GroupMe's and other things. So it's definitely a battle. All we can really do is put in place what we have. And then, Loretta and I have been working on constructing some language for students An email is going to go out to them from Student Affairs, and they let us write a paragraph to parents about supporting their students to be academically honest and working from home. Mark Woodard let us put something in UB Learns today in student updates. It's a message to students about academic integrity. So we're trying to remind them, and importantly, either remind them to aspire to their better nature and do things the right way, and or remind them that consequences are still heavily in place. So that's a really important part of it too for instructors at this time, is to not let your standards down. And if you see something that you think is dishonest, go follow the process we have in place so that students can be deterred from cheating because they think they will face consequences.
Judy, I know it's hard in a very technically oriented field to veer away from those multiple choice sort of exact answers. But if there's any way you can apply, your knowledge in some sort of way, make them show you something that isn't just, an A, B, C, D sort of question, short answers sort of thing, just to make it personal to them. I don't know, I know it's hard to think like, oh my God, we've only got a month and I have to change everything. But that really would stop some of the, I guess, the cheating and the taking pictures.
And I really like that idea. It's just that I have 340 of them.
Yeah.
So I can't, I just don't have the energy to contact each one of them individually and do that. It would be great to give them all an oral exam and sit and talk face to face, like we are, do that. So I guess it is what it is, and we have to accept that. I did consider this morning sending an email. I don't want to sound preachy to them, but just kind of, and maybe even putting together a little video so they can see my face and telling them, that their own personal self-esteem and their integrity, that's something they'll take with them. When they leave this course, I'm not going to be following them around, but they have to live with themselves and their own feelings about how they've performed and their integrity. And is that like too preachy?
No, do it, Judy, do it. I really feel like they need to hear these messages from people that they know and respect. And so I would really encourage you to do that. I think that's a great idea.
Okay.
And especially Judy, in a kind of a discipline that has other standards besides just UB standards. You have accreditation standards to uphold as well. So when we do our remediation meetings with students who have actually violated something within the policy, we always try and draw the connection between not just their minor violation, but how it relates to their going forward. So anything you can do to kind of support that is great.
Okay. And these are our future nurses and pharmacists.
Right.
And so I do always share with them at the beginning of the semester that their patients are going to be dependent on them to know their anatomy, and obviously to use it wisely to take care of them, but also they're going to have access to patient records and personal information and all the HIPAA guidelines. And this is not just about talking about patients in the elevator or sharing information, in the real world. It's not just the classroom, but who are they as a person, and the privilege they have to take care of others. So I just didn't want to sound too preachy.
I think that you're putting good limits on yourself, thinking about sounding too preachy. So that gives me confidence that you won't. And I feel like it's a really important message for them.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions?
I didn't understand when I was setting up the quiz about everything about the feedback, what to give them and not give them. So I don't know if this is a good forum, to ask that question, or if I should just look online a little more and try to learn. But there were lots of options, letting them see all the correct answers, letting them see the whole test. I understood waiting until everyone is graded. I'm not letting them see it then, so I have to go back in and give everybody zeros who didn't take the test, I guess, before they're able to see it. But how much do we let them see?
Well, Maggie, or maybe you could talk more about the specifics of your choices, but I would say if it was a live class and you gave the exam, when they come back afterwards, do you give the test back for them to look at? Do you want them to see where they made mistakes so that they can then learn what those correct answers are? And set up your feedback options based on the same mindset you have for a live class. What's your hope for what they're going to do now that the exam is over? And I think it's always a good learning tool for students to be able to see what they, at a minimum, what they got wrong, so they know what they need to now learn so that they would get it right in the future. So that would be my minimum standard. I don't know if anybody else wants to add to that. Okay.
So have you all found any assessment tools that you've used now that work well that you could share with the other faculty?
I would just like to say one thing, if I could.
Good, Tom, go ahead.
So you guys talked a little bit about setting timings and randomizations. Those are all great comments. One thing I would just caution on, and this goes for more than just testing, but any kind of assignment, if you're going to set timings, actually test those timings prior to making them live. A lot of times you think, oh, I'm going to give them 30 seconds or a minute, but it actually takes a minute and 10 seconds to read the question or go through each answer. And a good rule of thumb is read it once, say it to yourself once, and that's enough cognitive load usually for someone to go through a question.
Excellent, Tom, thanks. Other concerns people have? Is there anything you can think of that you think the Office of Academic Integrity could do to better support you in your work?
Well, I think you mentioned sending an email out to all of the students, if I understood you right, or some sort of a message to them.
Yes.
I think that would be helpful to have something come from, or the administration or.
We haven't gotten permission yet to send an email to all the students. We're working on that. We were able to put a message to them inside their UB Learns. When they go into UB Learns, there are student announcements and they'll be able to see an announcement there. And we were able to get something in a newsletter to parents. So we're working on getting some messaging directly to them from us. We'll see how that turns out over the next couple of days. We're also working, just so you know, to counter some social media. There are a lot of vendors out there that are basically cheating vendors. Struggling with papers, we'll write one for you for the low cost of $10 a page. Those kinds of things. And as University Communications reports to us, chatter about that is really elevated. So we're working with our communications team to counter that chatter in a variety of ways, because if students only see the messages about their dishonest options and they don't see the counter message about why they should be wary of those and say no to those, then I feel like we're not quite doing our part. So we're working on that.
Yeah, I do appreciate that. I attended a couple of UUP meetings that were focused on, copyright and protecting our materials, because I have had students approach me and admit that they were kind of solicited by these companies to come and, video my lectures or take pictures of my lectures. And some of them shared the sites that they were on. And I did try to contact some of these sites, and they made it so difficult for me to challenge them. Even when I told them that some of the things they were putting online were things I had permission to use from a textbook company who certainly has copyright, you know, rules, and it just doesn't seem to, you know, budge them at all. They're just going to do it.
Yeah, that's interesting, Judy. I know nursing's had problems with that, with vendors actually coming into your rooms and trying to solicit students to take notes for them or pictures of slides. Some companies like Chegg and Course Hero and those kinds of places will respond better if they hear from an Office of Academic Integrity. So if you ever need our support to, you know, co-author something to them or write something on your behalf, let us know. That's part of what we do.
Thank you. That's very good to know.
Anyone else have any thoughts?
I was just going to add a shameless plug for our office that we're willing, Kelly and I go out to various divisions and are happy to speak with either faculty or students to promote the values of academic integrity. And we've given many workshops and you know, just little talks to incoming freshmen, for example, or transfer students or faculty members who are just looking for more information. So we're happy to do that in the future.
We'll also be offering this same Zoom workshop the next 2 Thursdays in a row at 1 o'clock. So if you have colleagues who you think have questions or would be interested in hearing from us, we'll be on next Thursday at 1 and then the following Thursday also.
No questions came in through the chat, so unless you have something, if you have specific questions for CEI as well, or if there's something that we can help you guys with, please let us know.
And you can also reach out to us, obviously, after this is over. The slides will come out to you, but also, you know, just reach out, use the Academic Integrity website, and that will give you all our contact information if you want to get in touch with us.
Thank you. I just want to thank all of you for the time you're investing, because the learning curve is pretty steep, at least on my end, and knowing that you have our backs and that you're there is really reassuring. So thank you to all of you.
And thanks for your hard work, Judy, with those big classes. Good grief. And preparing our future nurses. What is more important? So right back at you. All right, well, thank you, everyone. I'll stop the recording and end the session. And then if you need anything, let us know.
Thank you, Kelly.
Best of luck to everybody.
Thanks, Kelly.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye.